This is Still Here, Still Queer, Now What? Your companion through queer midlife. I'm Dr. Paul Taylor-Pitt, author of Still Here, Still Queer, Now What? The book, coming everywhere October 21st. This episode, I need to put a health warning on it because it's like sunshine for your eyes. You know, like with the solar eclipse, there was a warning, like do not look directly at the sun. With this episode, you're going to be dazzled with so much sunshine. You might want to listen to this, watch it in a darkened room, in a cool space, because it's just so full of warmth. It's so full of love. It's so full of light. It's brilliant. It's everything I expected it to be. And my expectations for my guest today, I don't know what I expected in some ways, other than I was curious. And this conversation blew away every expectation I had. My guest is the fabulous drag queen, Latina Ballroom, also known as John Hernandez. And I met Latina at Pride this year. I was in the Pride March with Queerwell, the mental health charity that I do some work with. And Latina was also marching with us. And Latina turned up in this like big rainbow dress and rainbow wig and just had this vibrancy, this energy. And what I noticed, and we talk about it in the conversation, because I guess, I don't know, this year I was a bit nervous for Pride. I was nervous that the conversations about Pride feel more and more toxic each year. And I worried that the reception would be more muted or even aggressive. And what I noticed happening during the Pride March was that Latina would be walking just a few steps ahead of the rest of Queerwell. And the way that people responded to her was just incredible. It was like she lit them up so that as we walked past, they were cheering and smiling. And it was electric. And she had such an amazing presence. We didn't really talk. We kind of posed for lots of photos, and actually Latina ended up being used in most of the media photos of Pride. Like if you search Pride 2026 London, you'll probably see a photo of Latina, which I think again is testament to the energy that she was giving off. And we had such a lovely time. We were kind of marching together, posing together. And at the end, I got in touch and just said, this was so great. You know, you were so fantastic. And a couple of things surprised me straight off. Firstly was that Latina is middle-aged, which I was not expecting because she looks amazing. And secondly, that she's only been doing drag for a very short time. And I thought, oh, there's a story there. There's something to scratch and find out what's underneath. And actually what's underneath is just so much more than I expected. So I'm going to say no more. I've already given too much away. Just sit back and enjoy the human sunshine of Latina Ballroom. If people haven't come across you before, who are they meeting today?
They are meeting, the person that they always dreamt of. The person who they always wanted to be. Look, so what you met was a character, right? You know, outside of that character, someone completely different. So I'm John Rodriguez and I do drag, and it's the character you met. So my character is Latina Ballroom, as you experience yourself. Well, actually, I was very in my best behavior there. So
Right.
it's a larger...
Were you well behaved?
I was very well behaved. I was
Really?
very well behaved. Oh, yes. Latina Ballroom is a larger than life character. And especially when she's on stage. Like I say, it's a very different character to who I am. However, it's an extension of me. So that's why when I say they're meeting the person who they always wanted to be, it's because there's no filter. There's no inhibitions. There's no fear. There's nothing. With Latina Ballroom, it's just what you see. So yeah, so that is who you met on that Saturday, that wonderful Saturday.
Is that who you've always wanted to be?
No. So I fell into that character just by chance. So I was born in Gran Canaria, in Spain.
Were you?
Yeah, so it's a very, very, very weird story. But I've always seen drag queens all around. I've always seen them, but then the locals, so the people that lived there, because we were so repressed and so driven by religion as well. I'm talking to you about the 80s, 90s. That world was almost, too dark. It was too naughty, too undergroundy. So although I was surrounded by them, I never felt part of them, even in my teenage years. Um, and then it was later in life when you start finding yourself, when you start saying, I want to give anything a go. Life is too short. When I met somebody who was doing drag, a much younger person, I was supposed to be teaching them how to dance. And then they said, oh my goodness, you're so funny. You'd be a brilliant drag queen. I said, no. So one thing led to another. And I said to my husband, Simon, I said, I'll do it once. So I started putting everything together and I thought, this is a lot of work. I'm going to do it 3 times max. And yeah, like nearly 4 years later now, I'm doing it nearly every weekend. But yeah.
How old were you when you did it for the first time?
So 43? So I'm 46, 47 now. So yeah, 43. And it was interesting because I started doing it. I found it really liberating, real fun, and real like, ooh, I've never done this before, and I'm actually all right at it. So I started doing just performances, lip syncing, and, I wouldn't grab a mic. And then I entered this drag competition and I won it. So that was like a boot camp. So it forced me to do everything from comedy to performing to, grabbing a mic and talking to people and getting people involved, connecting with people. And this is when, I was against a lot of youngsters. Drag is I feel, is very now with the whole drag race. And a lot of young people take it on, which is great at a very early age. And against all odds, the oldie won it. So, so there's a lot to be said about that, yes.
I find it fascinating watching Drag Race when they're like, oh, look, here comes grandmother. She's 30. And I think, oh my God, it's such a young person's thing. And also it feels like you've chosen to go into drag not at the easiest time. Like maybe, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years ago, it felt like it was like really peaking. And then I think in the past few years, there's been so many weird, toxic conversations about drag queens. Were you aware of that? Or were you just like, fuck it, it's something I'm going to try?
Because I grew up, like I said, with an environment that was always demonizing drag queens and the art of drag. I was kind of aware of it, and I was aware that it became very popular, and then suddenly it took that dip. And I didn't care, just for the sake of rebelling, and showing to myself that I can do something different, something new. I just did it. And it is true that being a little bit older, I deal with that toxicity a lot better than some of the youngsters. And drag has so many aspects to it, especially nowadays. I just put a wig on, put some makeup on, and I become this larger than life character. But outside of this character, I know who I am, and I know the differentiation between the two characters. Some of the younger folk, especially, throughout their journey, drag becomes part of their journey, whether it's their own identity or them exploring themselves, who they want to become. Drag allows you to do that, to be fully yourself unapologetically. And I guess that is something that they wouldn't do in their personal life. So at some point, for those people that are treating or drag becomes their journey, that they're treating it or it becomes, there's a moment or a place where the two merge. And that's when they start, showing their true selves, and drag help them get there. But the funny thing about drag is that you do drag. Drag is entertainment, mostly, is partly political. But for some people that are going through this journey of finding themselves, whatever that looks like, it can also be very destructive and disruptive. because being entertainment, you get judged, so you're not going to be liked by everybody, and that's absolutely fine. If you're a singer, not everybody's going to like your voice. As an entertainer, you understand that. But when you merge your persona, when you treat that as your journey, any negative comment, anything that is said about your persona, your entertainment, will be treated as something very personal, because they will feel that it's an attack on them. So I'm finding that a lot as well. And I think that that's where some of the toxicity comes from as well. It's a very bizarre world, but in a good way. In a good way. Like I said, I've seen some phenomenal things, and people becoming who they really want to become through drag. And I've also seen some very shitty stuff as well. So it's like anything.
I think against the backdrop of, increasing negativity about drag queens, about trans people, about queer folk in general, what really struck me on the day we met at Pride was how people responded to you and how you just lit up the space. And it was so wonderful. Like, I think I kept just following you around because it was so nice to just see the response that you got. And, you were very vibrant. You were kind of like, you ended up being like the face of Pride 2026. Every news agency picked up on that photo of you. It was amazing. But I think there was something about the charisma that you have. Everyone responded to it so well. And it was really energizing and empowering. How was it for you, like marching through? I mean, I noticed you were in trainers, which was fine, appropriate, I guess. But I was also thinking, all right, okay, where's the heels?
I did have platforms, first of all, but they did break halfway through, just before we met in the morning. And I thought, I'm just going to wear trainers. And the thing is, with uneven floors, you just don't know where you're going to be walking. So, my ankles are too valuable, darling. I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
So this is why I say it's an extension of me, right? So, you do get drag queens that perhaps don't have that connection with people. I've always been like this. So I used to be a professional Latina Ballroom dancer, hence my name, Latina Ballroom. And I was never the most technical person, the most technical dancer in Blackpool, whichever floor I was dancing on. And I was never the most visible either, because I'm quite short, I'm quite petite. You met me, right? But there was an energy, and the judges always gave me that feedback. There was an energy that they couldn't take back their eyes off me, right? So I guess that, that's just naturally who I am. Even at work, my day job, my bosses are like, it doesn't matter if you're not the most technical on anything. You bring the energy, you bring the fun. And I guess that my whole life has been about connecting with people and being humble, not taking myself too seriously. And that's what you transmit. That's what you project. And I think that anything that requires you to be in the public eye, that gives you any type of platform, and if what you're doing is fairly political, like drag, I think that you need to have that ability to connect with people. I don't think that I've worked hard on it. Like I said, I've just made sure that I hadn't suppressed it. When you watch something like RuPaul Drag Race, it all becomes about certain stereotypes, right? And you see a lot of drag queens out there that mimic that stereotype. Oh, I look up to that person. I want to become like that. In my case, it's like, I'm me. I know who I am. And only age gave me that, actually. I want to become an extension of, and I know that people are going to like it. And believing that is what actually gets you through and gets you that type of reaction that you're talking about. It's amazing. It's always the same. But having said that, I was with you guys. It was so lovely. It was so queer. It was so loving. I loved it. But then walking back to the car, I did get a couple of very negative comments. So the usual negative slurs being shouted at. But largely, I'd say 90% of the time, it's always people coming to you, congratulating you, complimenting you for the way you look, and just joining in. So absolutely, absolutely. It's just this energy. You know, at the moment, I'm very calm. I'm sitting here with you with some water. I was going to say a cup of tea, but I don't have a cup of tea. And you also need moments like this, right? Of reflection, of calmness, and, you know, just, you know, chilling. But generally, I'm like a little bunny. That's what I am.
How did you become a professional ballroom dancer?
I was a very good footballer when I was little. Very, very, very good footballer.
I've got so many questions. Like I feel like I could ask you 17 million different things.
I've
I
had
thought,
very hell of a
I thought,
laugh.
how did you become a ballroom dancer was going to be an easy one. I didn't expect you to say because I was a really good footballer.
And I was scouted to be in the junior professional football, you know, in the region, in the Canaries, right? And then it was going to be moving to the Spanish national football league as well. You know, but I'm talking about juniors. I'm not talking about, I was very young back then. And, but I couldn't cope. You know, I'm that kind of, I'm mega competitive, but with myself. And everything that I do, I like to do it. I like to take care of my craft, whatever I do. And football is something that you play, but you also follow. So following football for me was almost impossible. Just became too competitive. It became too, you know, there were too many emotions involved to the point that I ended up in hospital a couple of times, you know, with anxiety attacks and all sorts of things. And the doctor said to my mom, no more football for this boy. Just not,
Wow.
you have to stop football. You know, it's literally is. And then my mom stopped it. And my dad said, well, but he's so all over the place. He's like a Duracell bunny. Like I said, so what are we going to do with him? I want to do something physical, I said. And then someone suggested dancing. Said, well, football, he said, he dances. He doesn't play football, he dances. And then they put me into this dance class and the rest is history. And then I became a professional dancer.
Good on him. He's a good footballer. And then you would switch to becoming a dancer and they'd be like, oh, okay. Not sure what happened there. How was your family with you as this little bundle of energy? Did they know what to do with you?
No. And you know, I had a very, very, very difficult upbringing. And most of the time I was misunderstood. But it was mostly because I wasn't allowed to talk half the time. That's why I wasn't understood. They just knew that I was different. They just knew that I was different. And like I said, very competitive and giving everything to whatever I did. I was very curious, you know, from a very, very young age. And I still am. That's why, you know, I got into drag and I make my own dresses and, you know, I love learning. It's something that I'm very curious. So no, they didn't know what to do with me. But I feel looking back that whatever they put me or whichever place they put me, I would have done well because I'm one of those people that believe that talent is not everything. It's the hard work that you put behind it. It's the care that you put into it. And it's the believing in yourself as well. And surrounding yourself by the right people, you know, will always get you what you want. So I don't want anyone out there thinking, oh, I lack talent, therefore I will never do it. You know, you can still do it. You can achieve whatever you want and you can learn. Everything can be learned. There are certain aspects, like I said, personality wise, whether you are more of an introvert, an extrovert, more energetic, less energetic, that is different. That will shape whatever it is that you're doing. But it doesn't necessarily become better or worse. You just put your work behind it and take care of it, self-belief, and you'll succeed. 100%. I'm sure you're okay with that, Paul.
Yeah. And I think some of the things you can learn, some of the things are a bit more innate. Other things, I think it depends on whether you feel like you can put your mind to something and succeed or fail. It doesn't matter. I think I sometimes don't put my mind to stuff because I think it's not going to work. So I don't even try. Whereas it sounds like you could be pointed in any direction and you would just be like, I'm going to attack this full speed. And you said your parents kind of knew that you were different. Did you know that you were different?
No. So I knew, so I come from a very humble background. Okay, so if I show you where I come from, basically, the vast majority of people that went to school with me either ended up in drugs or in jail or somewhere dodgy. I was destined for that. Very, very few people got out of that situation because it's just societal, isn't it? I don't know what it is nowadays. Actually, things have changed. Back in the 80s, there wasn't a chance in hell. So Spain was going through a transition period from dictatorship to democracy, and it was a very weird time. So on paper, everybody around me kind of gave up. They didn't see hope. And I'm talking about kids. It was very sad. And you saw the anger, you saw the not bothering, why bother? You saw the discrimination, every time, because we've got ID cards over there and the ID card shows your address. So whenever you went for either a job or to apply for anything, they'll see the address and look at you and, raise an eyebrow so they know where you come from. So I guess that all of that really hits you, but it didn't faze me. So from that respect, I knew that it was different. I knew that I said, I will get out of this. This is not who I want to be. And I'm not going to follow everybody else. I'll just do my own thing. And that inspired a lot of people around me. Because it's true, inspired a lot of people and it attracted really good people towards me, but it also drove a lot of hate. Because obviously you were different. You were trying to achieve, you were defining what it was the norm there. So it was like you were rejecting your roots. And it wasn't that. It was just a case of, I realized this is not good enough and I want to be better. But that happens today. That happens all the time. So every time that you want to do better, every time that you see someone doing well, I can 100% assure you that there will be a bunch of people out there that will want to stop that person because, it will be a bad reflection on themselves. But that's something that they work on rather than the other person, as we both know. But again, with age...
Because you're kind of holding up a mirror to that.
Exactly. With age, you realize...
And where
did
that come from for you? That feeling of, I must do better. I must get away from this. Like, was that something that your parents had encouraged you to do, or was it much more about you standing out from even the people that you were with?
So it was curiosity, first of all. Like I said, I was a very curious person, so I didn't accept what was happening around me as the norm. That's number one. Number two, because of what I was going through and the way that I was treated, sometimes by my own family. And I don't mind saying it. I thought, I don't want to become that person. It's making me feel like this. There's no way that I ever makes someone else feel like this. So I realized that there was a chain and I needed to break that chain at any point or at some point. And in order to do that, I had to do something different. And I'm talking to you 8 years old. I was already thinking like this. So my first job was bakery at the age of 9. I took it upon myself after school to go to the bakery and work there, to learn how to make bread. Don't ask me why. And I used to take grades. I was very proud every time at the end of the day, I wasn't paid, of course, but, they would give me, a bag full of bread. And I used to take it home and I said, look what I've earned, right? So this was me. And my parents were like, oh, where have you been all evening? And I said, well, damn it. And I've been meeting people and I've been doing this and the other. So yeah, it's being curious, being on the constant move as well. I always wanted to move. The moment that you stop, especially where I come from, the moment that you stopped is the way that you started thinking too much or you let others lead your life. And who I had around me, it was going to be a life that I didn't want because I saw the end result and I thought I didn't want that. So I took ownership of my own and accountability at the age of 8. I know that is, but yeah, I've always been very independent when it comes to that. That's why when I got into drag lately, a lot of people say, well, you're going to get into drag. Are you mad? At your age and everything. I said, I don't care. I'm going to do it.
So already we've got John the baker, the footballer, the ballroom dancer, the drag queen. Who else have you been? What other incarnations have you had in between those?
Well, I've got a day job as well, obviously. So I've done all my, my university years. I did my postgrad as well. Nowadays, I'm a risk manager, and it really fits. It really, really fits.
Does it? That's not what I expected you to say.
I've worked in many, many industries. I've worked, you know, so I was involved in designing the London 2012 stadium through to oil and gas. I've worked in nuclear. I've worked in defense as well. I didn't like it. I only lasted 1 year there. And now I work for Dyson as well, so, he was designing a car. So I got into automotive for a while. And now I work for a well-known bank, and I'm a risk manager. And it's the best job that I've ever had because of that curiosity. People talk to you. I get into all these projects, all these changes, all this, whatever it may be. And I just rip it apart and I say, okay, so how can we improve? Where are the pitfalls? Where this? And it really goes with my personality. And I love it. But yes, I've got many. I just love learning, and I love trying new stuff. I've also done things that I'm not very good at, but I've maintained them. I'm doing music lately with my drag. Can I sing? Hell no. But does that stop me? No. And so it's about giving everything a go. What do you have to lose? And I guess again that comes with age, Paul. That comes with age. I've done it all my life, but nowadays I do it without holding back. So back then I used to do it with an element of holding back, an element of hiding who I was so I could fit in and I could find a way through, a way forward, and trying to adapt to my surroundings. Nowadays, it's like, this is me. I understand my surroundings. My surroundings also need to adapt to me, So I've learned how to do that wonderfully, I think. So I don't need to compromise who I am nowadays. In the past, I did, and we all have, I think. So, yeah.
So I've been going to Gran Canaria for 22 years, and Dan and I go at least twice a year when we can. I've always found it to be a place where I can be completely myself, but I guess I see this much of it in a way that, let's say someone came to London and they spent a week in Soho and they went back and said, oh my God, I love the UK. It's brilliant. I realize I'm seeing just a tiny part of Gran Canaria, but it surprises me to hear that for you, like in a way I would imagine that it's such an accepting place, but maybe not. Maybe that's just what I see as a tourist, as someone who shows up and stays in the one place for 2 weeks, then goes home again. I just thought everyone would be so used to the queerness, but is that not the case?
I think it is nowadays, and it's certainly changed. But as I said earlier, Spain was split into two back in the day. Well, Spain was going through what was going through. But then there were these pockets of, we were so repressed for so many decades. General Franco was the last standing dictator in Europe. And he died in the late 70s. So the whole of the 80s were a transition period. You have to remember that, there weren't, kind of generations in between. So we had to go from one generation that grew up in a dictatorship with very little education, because that's what they do, keep people uneducated so they don't rebel, right? And, very, very Catholic led. So it was, very religion upfront, and rules and what you can and cannot do, to, suddenly we are going to be free overnight, right? We are going to become who we want. So all these people that were underground, all these people that were hiding, all these people that weren't allowed to be themselves, suddenly came out with a bang, with a big, big, big bang. And they came out fighting. All these people came out fighting. So, I could talk hours about this, but in Spain, in the Canaries, everywhere, there was this massive movement that it was very localized. It's true, it was very localized, but it was very loud at the same time. So a lot of education went with it. And my generation was called the generation of hope, because if we didn't change, Spain knew that they will have another 20, 30 years of, transitioning, not moving forward. But luckily, I wouldn't say that the education system was great, because again, they had to be very careful because they had to, keep balance between what was happening in society, what they could tell the kids, and keeping parents happy as well. Parents that had, a very distinct mindset driven by that fascism. But yeah, I think that growing up for ourselves, it was very conflicting. You heard something at home, you heard your parents, friends, parents, or what, everybody in your community saying one thing. You heard the church saying something else. You heard politics doing something else over there. Heard something else in school, and then you saw those pockets of people making a lot of noise. So it was mega confusing, and it took a while. It took a while. So slowly but surely, I think that everybody has been everybody. I feel that Spain is a very well-educated country nowadays. There was a big push on education to change that societal mindset, and I think it worked. So nowadays is very accepting. It's very welcoming. But it's still, I mean, my mother, obviously, my grandparents, a lot of these people are still alive, and they're still the main voters. So although they have changed their mindset, you cannot take away their upbringing and how they cannot compute certain things. So it's almost, where you go in Gran Canaria is hidden away. It's like you say, it's a very small part that, people, the locals will go and visit and say, this is colorful, this is over the top, and then go back home. But yeah, it's Spain is a wonderful Spain. It's a wonderful place. I wouldn't want to go back, and Simon and I want to retire in the Canary Islands. I'm not sure about Gran Canaria. It's too lively for me nowadays. But no, it is a wonderful place, and it has changed. But the 80s and 90s especially, it was tough. It was very, very, very tough. And that's why nowadays I'm a great believer in education. And perhaps I've got that skill of, not just fighting, or pushing pushing a subject through, or, it's all about bringing people with it. How can I bring people with me? How can I make them understand rather than just tell them? And that is also part of what you saw in London Pride. Is someone who people will then get attracted to, and it gives me that power to say, hey, and now I've got you. I've got this platform, and I'm gonna tell you something really important in a way that you will buy into it, that will take you into a journey yourself. So yeah, because I lived it, I can apply it. I've done that. So it's very, very powerful.
And what I really take from that is the sense making that you were doing from all of these different stories that were being told, not necessarily about you specifically, but about people like us. You were hearing something from school, something from the church, something from family, and then you saw this kind of uprising of people who were going, actually, now we're going to be ourselves. Do you remember how old you were, or where you were, like when you first came out to yourself, before you ever told anyone?
So I've always known it was there. I was very little. So where I came from, I met and lost, I had a lot of trans friends. It was very visible. So I knew who I was before I can even remember. So I cannot tell you a moment when I came out to myself, because I simply don't remember it. I just remember being me. But I do remember, oh gosh, this is difficult. So I do remember I'm talking to you as a teenager, early, 12 years old or whatever, but kids, we had to grow up very quickly. And the trans community back then, because I'm sorry, it makes me really emotional. The trans community couldn't, they were completely isolated, completely it was very bad. So these people, in order to be themselves, in order to live their true selves, They couldn't do it through work, through help from charities, from the government. There were bigger things happening in Spain. We were transitioning from that dictatorship to the country that you see today. And that was the most important thing that needed to happen in the country. So a lot of these groups got marginalized, were very marginalized. And I remember seeing my trans friends, because we used to hang out. I remember going back streets, injecting themselves, liters and liters of silicone. And, so they could get their hips and everything. And the only way that they could be themselves, so they can drive that, transformation for themselves in order to live their true selves, was through prostitution, through drugs, and it was very difficult. So a lot of them sadly ended up dead, through one way or another. And I guess that's where everything that I used to see over there, people making all this noise, listen to what was happening in school, parents, etc. That's when I started realizing all of that, which I'm telling you, it was at the age of 12 or something, is when everything came to reality. It was like, oh, this is happening. This is how it's happening. This is not right. And now I understand what's happening around me and why it needs to be fast tracked. We need to move fast. So yeah, it was a very traumatic experience, but at the same time, it was what happened back in the day. So I just don't think that it could have been avoided. Any transition will require that type of painful section, right? That painful period. And I lived it. I saw it from a very young age. And because I didn't have anyone around me, I had to make my own mind up on what was going on. So yeah, so I started realizing everything fairly quickly in my head and what was going on. And yeah.
The thing I sometimes have to remind myself when I think about, having a very different experience growing up, I grew up in Scotland. I guess it was much more quiet. We just didn't really talk about things like that. I didn't meet another gay person until I was 15, 16 maybe. There was this background noise that I was picking up on that said, it's not okay to be like that. And so even though like you said, I felt like I knew who I was all along, what became more and more apparent was, and me being that is not okay to some people. I never thought there was anything wrong with it for me, but I was starting to pick up these signals that other people had a problem with it. For me, that was what was one of the main things that made me leave Scotland. Did you feel like that awareness of who you were gave you the propellant to then leave Spain, or did it make you want to stay and do something different there? Like how much, if at all, did that come into your decision of where you ended up?
So first of all, I've never come out in Spain. I've never, but people have met my husband and everything, but I have never physically come out, exactly because of what you're saying. I realized from a very young age that everything that was happening around me, there was nothing wrong with me. It was the people that had an issue with that. And when I started using the term coming out, and I started meeting other gay guys or even, lesbian girls or whatever, they were all talking about this term of coming out and really suffering. They were really suffering. How am I going to come out? How are my parents going to take it? And I remember thinking, who are you coming out for? Are you coming out for yourself, or are you coming, who are you? Who needs this? And I realized that the need to come out is to make somebody else aware. And the fear is that how that somebody else will take it. So you're not coming out for yourself, you're coming out for somebody else. And at that point, I don't know whether that makes sense, but at that point, I made the decision never to come out, because I thought, I am who I am. If they can accept me as who I am, then it's not worth being with them. I don't care who they are. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life fighting, trying to convince or whatever. Because I had to walk away from situations fairly quickly and without much emotional attachment, because otherwise I would have ended up in very bad situations. In the same way I've had to walk away from situations, I've had to walk away from people. And honest to God, Paul, this may sound bad, but I didn't care whether it was family, whether it was whatever. I was determined to live a good life, a happy life, and someone where I would help everybody that was around me because I'm a people's person, but not necessarily be a slave of somebody else's thoughts or inhibitions. So that's why I decided to do and not to do a lot of things. Now, I never thought of coming to the UK. I would have stayed there quite happily and help others out because I always thought of that through education, through leading the way, through pioneering, and through, making others see, especially the younger generations that were coming behind me, that it was possible because all I saw was failure. And, because that's what the situation was. And I thought, no, someone can make a difference here. But then I met Simon and, we had to make a decision. Is it here or is it in Spain or is it in the UK? For a number of reasons, we decided for me to come to the UK. But I left my country when I was 19 years old. 20 years old. So very, very, very young. And you have to remember back then, we didn't have internet. We didn't have the smartphones that you've got today. So I came here completely blind. I mean, I thought that you all guys lived in castles and drink, I knew nothing about the UK. But even when I came here, I laid down the rule with Simon. I said, look, I'm leaving everything behind. I said, if I leave everything behind, I'm also leaving my family, I'm leaving my friends, and, we're going to make this work. And this is how it's going to work. If you are in, this is how we're going to do it. If you don't want to do it this way, I said, we are opening ourselves to risking it. I said, so you need to tell me now because I need to make, possibly the most important decision of my life. So he was in and he loved the idea of the commitment, of the working, building things together. It was all good stuff. And we've been together now for 26 years. Would you believe it? A very, very, very long time.
Dan and I have been together 26 years too. What kind of response do you get when you tell people that?
Well, that we've been together for 26 years or the whole story? Well, from our community, I get well, I'm sure that you get it as well, the jaws drop and they say, well, how do you do it? And I've got a lot of friends, obviously, that are single at the moment and are young, well, from different ages. And I look at how dating works nowadays and how relationships work and what people want out of dating. And I kind of feel sorry because all these apps and everything, it's great for what they are, but at the same time, there's a very toxic, dark side to them, and I feel very sad. Back then, it was much more personal. If you wanted to meet somebody, you had to go out. There had to be a personal connection. I don't know. It was just a different time, and I think that's what allowed us to communicate very early on. And through communication is how, we build the right foundations. I just feel that nowadays people perhaps don't think so much about the foundation. They just want that end product. But then they don't know how to get there. I think that's quite sad in a way. And I see it with a lot of friends, a lot of good friends. So yeah, so in a way I feel it was more difficult back then. Like leaving a country without knowing where you were, it was very tough, and there were lots of surprises and some of them not very pleasant either. Nowadays you can plan, where you're going, you've got these translating tools, you've got all of the tools that you need to succeed, but people feel very lost. And yeah, they're very surprised. They ask us how we do it. And my answer is that is communicate well, build something together, because through building something together is when, we all have our quirks. There's always dips in every relationship, and there are highs and there are downs. But when there's a down, it's not just about you two, it's about everything that you have built together, everything. So, talk it through, make it work. I'm from a generation that when a fridge freezer stopped working, you had to fix it. There was no money to throw it away and buy a new one. And I think that we are in this throwaway society nowadays, and that has transcribed in a way and how people live their relationships as well. I may be completely wrong, but this is what I observed back then.
I think it's such a great way to think about it, like living in this disposable society. Because I often think we're living in this society where more and more we're encouraged to be at home. So we all have massive TVs where we used to have to go to the cinema. And if we want clothes, we can have them delivered the next day from ASOS. And if we want a shag, we can go on Grindr and someone will come over. And if we want food, we'll get a Deliveroo. And it's almost like we're encouraged to just be in one place. And I'm so glad that I grew up in a time when that wasn't available, because I think I would have just never left the house. And the idea of forming any kind of relationships like that, I just don't know how people do it. And I take advantage of it. I think it's great that we've had the opportunity of being in analog times and digital, but I have no idea how people are coping if this is their reality. In a way that I'm sure some people can't imagine what it was like when we didn't have the internet. And it still makes me laugh when I have to sometimes say to people, oh yeah, we didn't have the internet back then. We didn't have mobile phones.
You go, what? How did you take a pic? I don't know. I feel that you treasured things a lot more and you appreciated it a lot more. We weren't as connected in any way, shape or form. I love Eurovision, right? And, to find another Eurovian fan in my area was almost impossible. So I had to live with my passion, on my own, and I had to live it on my own. Whilst today, you can connect. So there are many benefits to a connected life and to the digital life. The problem that I've got is the entitlement that comes with it. Okay. So like I said, like you say, you order something from Amazon, if the food arrives cold, you leave a bad review and then they give you money back. If you don't like the t-shirt that you order from Amazon, you send it back because you've got, so, that drives a certain entitlement to where, they say, I'm not going to take care when I buy something whether I really like it or not, or look at what material is made of to make sure that is what I want. You just get it because that's what you want right now. And then it arrives and it's not what you expect, you send it back. And it's the same with people. That's what I'm observing. So there's an element of entitlement to it. And I think that COVID, and like you said, staying at home more has really magnified all of this, and people have made it even more their lives. So I think that we are, again, I understand about transitions in terms of society changes. And I feel that we are going through a big one at the moment. AI is coming along, is making a lot of decisions on our behalf. And I'm just wondering, algorithms are going crazy. And I'm just wondering how much power we're going to have in the future to choose when right now people cannot be bothered to choose properly. They just go for it because it gives them that instant gratification. There's no work towards it. Whilst before, if you wanted to buy a t-shirt, you had to visit 100 shops and not find exactly what you wanted. And even when you found what you wanted, you knew that you couldn't take it back. It wasn't the done thing yet. So you had to really look, does it stretch properly? So you really had to think and take care of what you were doing, of that activity, in order to get what you really wanted. So you were much more satisfied with your choice. Nowadays, that is gone. Does that make sense, Paul? I don't know why I'm making sense when I'm talking. I'm just letting it all out.
Turn it into a manifesto, turn it into a book, do something with it. Because I think you have reinvented yourself so many times, to me, in a way that feels like so exciting and so full of possibility, when your story could have been very different. You could have been the person that you feared you were becoming, and you decided, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to change. I'm going to put myself in those situations and take risks, and then end up, in a job about managing risk. And I feel like it's so empowering to hear that. And I feel like we've scratched the surface, because I'm sure there's so much more we could say. And I'm so grateful that we've had this conversation, and I would love to invite you to come back for another one, because I've got so many more questions. Like, it was so beautiful like being with you in the Pride Parade and seeing how people responded to you. And there was something about you that I just thought, this person is interesting. And I'm really glad to have had the opportunity just to kind of like look behind the curtain a little bit. We haven't even talked about drag. We haven't even talked about professional ballroom dancing. And that's just two of the things we could have talked about. I'd love you to come back.
I'd love to, Paul. And thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me.
Oh, it's amazing. The thing I ask everyone who comes on the podcast, obviously the title is Still Here, Still Queer, Now What? So if you were to finish that sentence for yourself, I'm still here, I'm still queer, and how would you finish it?
And I keep going. I'm still here, I'm still queer, and I still go. You know what? Everybody feels that sometimes that life is a battle. I don't see it that way. I really don't see it that way. I just see it as a big shop. Life is a big shopping center. And, you know, you are going to go into as many shops as you like. There's no right. There's no wrong. You're going to make mistakes. Sometimes you're going to walk into a shop that is completely dark and you're going to lose yourself, but you will come out eventually. But see it as that. See it as a range of opportunities, a range of things that are available to you. And I'm going to use that word again. Yeah, but I'm going to leave it there because don't act entitled. Okay, don't think that things are going to come to you and things are going to happen to you because it needs to be that way. You know, you need to make it happen for yourself, and you need to look around and you need to get excited about what you see. And you need to give things, rather than reject things, you need to give them a go. You need to understand them if you don't want to give them a go. And I think that that's what drives to, again, the word equality, the word, accepting, the word tolerance, so even if it's not for you, you become more tolerant towards other people, towards what's happening around you. And when you become more tolerant, you understand it better. And that frees you. That frees you to then say, okay, I understand that. I know where not to go, but I understand that. I'll go over there. Thank you very much. Rather than trying to fight it. So yeah, still going, still here, still going.
And I would love to be in a world where life is a shopping center rather than a battle. I think that's such a beautiful image. If you wanted people to find you, how could they find you?
Well, they will find me all over the Southwest, especially performing. Now, I'm very active on Instagram at Latina Ballroom. No dots, no anything, at Latina Ballroom altogether. You'll be able to see all the wonderful things. Even on my Instagram, when you see all my stories, all my posts, all my everything, they have I'm sure that you've looked at them, they have such a positive, it's important as well to put those political messages out and, but again, nothing that you'll see in my feeds will scream negativity. Even if the moments that we're going through are quite negative today, there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity to iron something out that hasn't been spoken about for a very long time. Sometimes it feels like regression, but I'll just say, let's take this opportunity. And you know what I'm talking about, everything that's happening today. Let's take this opportunity to re-educate people properly. And yeah, again, through positivity, through a smile in your face and through understanding where people come from as well, is the only way that we are going to get messages through. So go and visit my page and you'll see what I mean, all done through positivity, but always sending that message that people can relate to. Bring people with you.
I think you embody the idea of the generation of hope. And so thank you for bringing that hope and keep going.
Thank you, Paul.